Tayo was determined. His two close friends Bevo and Cedric looked at him with fascination and awe. He was definitely the leader of the three, but such had not always been the case. Tayo had been shy a few years earlier. He spent a great deal of time with these two close friends. Bevo was his cousin, and Cedric was almost exactly his age. They came from the Eastern Forest Tribe, or so they called themselves, but the past year had been a very difficult one, and the other two tribes they frequently came into contact with, tribes sharing their culture and language, had vanished after the Great Fire swept through the valley, forcing them to seek refuge in the shelter of two large caves in the mountain overlooking their former home. Everything had changed in the past couple of years. Tayo remembered growing up in a routine schedule of festival and activities. The tribe had been guided by a council of 3 elder men and one woman who was also vanished for extended periods of time with her young fire-bearer, the young woman who was learning the ancient art of seeing signs from the elder matron. Her words carried a great weight in the council meetings, for she would go and seek signs of guidance from a host of gods. Different gods spoke in different ways and for different purposes. She disappeared for 2 months immediately after the Great Fire, and everyone feared she had been lost. But the small light of her young fire-bearer's lantern, made from the skull of a bear many generations ago, was seen in the deepest night during the dark of the moon. The light was high in a distant mountain, and the watcher at night saw the light slowly approach as he kept the fire going for the tribe. She it was who found the 2 caves and the small valley that had been protected from the fire by the mountain, full of berry bushes and small fruit trees, and a small lake with fresh water and many small crabs and mussels. The whole tribe relocated to the mountain caves without debate. Her voice carried so much weight at that dark time. She it was also that urged the hunters not to go on that hunt. After the Great Fire, the tribes had been split. The tribe on the western side of the river simply vanished. The fire had approached quickly from the west, and the tribe ran to the east to avoid it. The fire had been delayed by the river for a full day, so there was plenty of time to find shelter from the fire before it arrived. But the smoke was noxious, and for 2 days it was hard to breathe. There were several ancient bathing holes in the stream, and ancient campsites the grandfathers had chosen long before, which were found by the tribe, and everyone sat in the bathing ponds until the fires had passed. But what was the tribe to do now? Before the great fires swept through the valley, the year had been neatly arranged by the ancestors. First came celebrations for the new year, marked by the new moon rising above the distant eastern mountains, where they now resided. This rising of the moon marked the time that the fig trees would be ripening, and the tribe went to the north to camp at the northern camp, where they would perform fire rituals guided by the seer on a sacred island in the river. It was at this time that the western tribe would meet them, and they would have dances and feasts at the great fire they would make. Many wives and husbands would be exchanged at these meetings. Every 5 years, sometimes 10, the northern people would appear with the western tribe, for they lived close to each other. The northern people were strange to the eastern tribe, as they wore fur coats and lived in a high mountain. None of these lands were visible to the eastern tribe, and whenever some young daughter or son went with the northern tribe for marriage, there was great rejoicing and many hours of talking and dancing when they would come to the sacred island for the great fire and feast. All this was arranged by the seer. She knew the signs of the caterpillars and the song of the owls and the schedule of the moon when the time was right, and every year the western tribe just appeared on the island at the same time. Somehow they just knew. It was not often that the northern tribe came with them, but perhaps every 5, sometimes every 10 years, just enough to keep the marriage lines fresh. But the great fire had caused a great gap in their world. The seer could not find any signs. There was no time for a fire to the north, and the fruit trees were gone at any rate. The hunters had gone with 2 women who had grown up as girls in the western tribe. They went to try to find signs of the western people, but they were gone for 3 weeks and returned with sad news. They could not find sign of anyone to the west or the north. The eastern tribe was alone. There was good news, however. The great fire had cleared away hundreds of years of old growth and heavy trees and vines from the old forest. All of it was flat earth now, and for a time you could see all the way across the river and to the northern mountains if you stood on a small hill during the evening. But soon, very soon, grasses began to grow. The black world they saw quickly turned to a vibrant green. The local deer and birds they had hunted for generations disappeared. For 2 years they'd eaten only small mice and frogs and whatever fish they could find, supplemented by fruits and berries. But then one day they discovered enormous woolly beasts, mammoth and rhinoceros, grazing in their once dark forest hunting grounds. The hunters considered this a great blessing, a comforting gift from the gods. But when they went to see the seer for her blessing for a hunt, she sharply rebuked them. She strongly scolded them for their arrogance and demanded they stay in their small valley and be content with the small mice and squirrels, as well as the freshwater crabs they could catch as they foraged for fruit. All of her signs urged her to stay in the valley where they were safe. But the hunters could not listen to this. They urged the elders to overrule her. One of these beasts would feed the tribe for weeks. This ended up to be very true. One of these beasts did indeed feed the tribe for 3 weeks. The beast also gave the tribe a huge amount of fur and leather and bone for tools. A great shed was built to smoke and preserve the meat. Fires were lit and burned day and night for 6 days, celebrating and feasting. The liver, one liver, fed all of the women in the tribe for a whole day. But 7 of the hunters, the fathers of many of the children, the healthiest and strongest men of the tribe, 7 were killed in the hunt, and 4 of them were terribly wounded, although they would and did recover. One of them would never walk again, but he became a great storyteller and lived 50 seasons after this terrible year of hardship. They had the fire that had robbed them of their schedule of movement and harvesting. The fire robbed them of their kin on the other side of the river, isolating them in this cruel world. The fire confused the seer, who was now puzzled and confused where before she'd been strong and confident in her wisdom and guidance. Now she would disappear for a week sometimes, and come back and sit for 2 days before she would speak a single word. She had been a great voice, but it was clear that her fire-bearer would be the next one to read the signs and speak with authority before the great council fire, and she was many years away from this appointment. Tayo awoke one night and went and shook awake his 2 closest friends. They were teenagers, not ready for initiation into the hunting groups of the adult men. They were not yet candidates for marriage. They did not possess the mastery of the 3 skills needed for passage into adulthood: fishing, hunting, and working leather into tools. They were all still learning. They had the authority to hunt small game. Wild dogs was their biggest conquest, and on the last hunt they had brought to the tribe 2 monkeys, a snake, and a dog. Plus they had captured a pregnant female dog who would bear a litter of puppies they would train to guard the tribe and assist them in their hunts. When Tayo was young he had seen hunting dogs, but the tribe had lost all of their dogs in the great fire. The dogs had shied away from the bathing ponds, and as the fire approached all of them had fled. None ever returned. It was customary in the tribe to keep female dogs, but to kill the young male dogs to eat during festival feasts. The female dogs would attract wild males during their fertility cycle, which would also increase the meat potential for the tribe. Besides, it just did not seem right to Tayo to kill a female dog, especially if it was pregnant. This pregnant dog was the first of Tayo's gifts to the tribe. There was a young girl in the tribe who was of special interest for the seer. She was only 7 at the time, but she spoke among the adults with unusual confidence. She held her head high as she spoke, something Tayo was simply unable to do, especially if all 3 of the elders were sitting together in front of a great fire, and he was asked to come and answer questions from them. He found his legs would shake at such times, but this young girl never shook. She always spoke loudly and clearly, and answered all questions put to her in a direct manner. She had dreams. Her mother would talk to others about the girl's dreams, for when she awoke she always told her mother her dreams. It seemed every night she had a vivid dream she would recount in detail to her astonished mother early in the morning, as they sipped steaming broth left from the previous night, and ate whatever fruits had been gathered at the time. The mother often felt obligated to report these dreams to the elders. Normally, such dreams would be entertainment, but as the year had seen the loss of almost all their normal camping grounds, the loss of all their customary foods, the loss of their kin, and almost all the adult males being killed or functionally disabled in one day, small signs suddenly gained a loud voice, especially since the great seer, who had once possessed a voice of thunder, all obeyed, was often silent or trembling in confusion. This young girl began to have authority. Her dream that recurred was of a lion that walked upright into the camp and gave them a new future. This lion was the sign that all the difficult struggles were behind them, and 3 lifetimes of ease and heavy feasting were about to begin. When Tayo heard of this vision, he had been given a vision in his mind, a vision as clear as a recent memory. He knew he could do this. He could give the tribe, defeated and quiet and slowly dying, a new beginning, a new life. He knew how to give the tribe this walking lion. Tayo woke Bavo and Sejuk and guided them away from the camp to a spot higher in the mountain where they had built a campfire a week earlier. He found the remnants of the fire and relit it and added a few sticks and began to talk to his friends. Their eyes slowly turned down as they stared into the fire as they realized what he was asking them to do. They were not yet men, but it had fallen on them to lead the tribe. The path Tayo was taking them had only 2 possible exit points. They would all die, but they would die together, struggling for the future of their tribe. For they did not know at all if the western or the northern tribes even existed at all anymore. They may be all that's left of the memory of their people. They cannot live on mice and crabs forever. They will slowly die, or they will suddenly live. The hunters had showed them the way, only they had gone in the wrong direction. The hunters had gone west towards the river into the great grasslands where their ancient ancestral hunting grounds had been. But their ancestors had been forest hunters, not open field big game hunters. The giant woolly mammoth and woolly rhinoceros had trampled them to death, although 4 did survive to kill 1 rhinoceros and return to tell the tribe. For 14 generations, the eldest in the tribe would wear this rhinoceros skin as a robe of authority at the council fire. The storyteller would remember from the hunter who could not walk every detail of that hunt. They could all die, or they could return as heroes to the tribe. They could give their tribe their future. Tayo told them if they would follow him, if they would trust him, They would live in the memory and songs of the tribe forever. They nearly did just that. As they sat at the fire, Tayo guided them what they must do. In the morning, Bavo killed a squirrel. Then he killed another, and another. They ate the meat and slowly worked the small hides. Cedric and Tayo found the rocks and branches of the sacred hunting tree. The branches of this tree were sacred for spears, strong and straight. The wood was strong but also lightweight and could be accurately thrown. Tayo and Cedric, once they had found the black, glass-like volcanic rocks, they slowly cut and shaved 20 branches before going back to their fire. They ate the squirrels Bevo had gotten for them, but the real prize was the skins. Cedric broke the glassy rocks with the round, pounding rocks they'd often got from the river. They used these rocks for breaking open the bones of the big animals they would kill, to eat the prized marrow inside. But now Tayo was using these round pounding stones to shape sharp, glassy points out of these rocks. Bevo and Cedric used small, sharp edges from these rocks to shave the skins of the squirrels and slowly carve the skins into a spiral. Each skin gave them many feet, softened and boiled in water of leather string. They cut a channel into the tops of the branches and rested the sharp, black glass points deep in the channel. Then they wrapped the branches in these wet, windy spirals of leather. They left the tops of these branches hanging over the fire, and they slept, occasionally one of them waking to toss some additional sticks onto the fire. When they awoke in the morning, the wet leather straps they had wrapped around the ends of their branches had dried and hardened. Each of them had 4 sharp, black, glass-tipped spears. They did not have the looks of children playing a game as they left their camp that morning. They had the looks of killers. Tayo had noticed almost a year before the deaths of the hunters, before the hardships of the tribe, before the gods had granted him the voice of authority. He'd noticed while hunting monkeys with his friends a cliff in the distance. There was a lion who sat at the edge of the cliff overlooking the empty valley before him. Tayo had heard a voice in his head reminding him to take notice of this lion. He looked at it as he ran past towards the thicker part of the forest where the monkeys lived. He took note of the cliff. He took note of the lion's resting spot. If he went to the top of that cliff, he could rain down huge rocks on that lion, and the lion would have 2 choices, to leap to his death or to succumb to the weight of the rocks and perish on the spot. Surely the lion would never expect such an attack. It was to the side of this hill he guided his friends. They ran and then jogged at a steady pace. There was a point where the legs running would reach a rhythm with the lungs breathing, and the body would just continue running for hours. Tayo found this rhythm, but he had to slow from time to time to be sure his friends would catch up. Before noon they had reached the top of the cliff, far above and behind the level spot where the lion loved to rest and watch. They did not need to wait long. The lion and 2 lionesses slowly wandered into view and took their rest just beneath them. If Tayo began to drop rocks, which lay everywhere around him, the lions would have no place to go but over the cliff. The path the lions had followed to gain this view was narrow and easily removed by the dropping of only a few modest rocks. Cedric took that position and slowly gathered a dozen rocks big enough to crush a lion's skull, while Tayo and Bevo slowly positioned 20 rocks each so they could barely move them. Cedric started the barrage, removing from the lions any hope of their escape. As the first rocks fell, the lions stood and stared down the path, their tails bolt upright. Tayo and Bevo then began to push over the edge the biggest rocks they could move. What happened next would be years of debate and controversy. The families descended from Bevo insisted that his rock had killed the lion. The descendants of Tayo insisted he had done so. At any rate, the lion and 2 lionesses were dead. The neat, black, glass-tipped spears that they had spent all night making were of no use. Tayo insisted they feast on the spot and slowly carve and prepare the remains of the lions for the trip back home. Tayo wore the skull of the lion and carried both hind legs of the lion for the feast. Bevo and Cedric both wore the heads of 2 lionesses and carried the hind legs of the lionesses for the feast. 2 years later, the old seer would die, and the first thing the little girl dreamed was of a fire and a feast at the old sacred island. The tribe relocated to the island and found 3 adult deer trapped by raging water on the narrow island. The tribe killed the deer and feasted and built a huge bonfire to celebrate. The new seer was beginning to have vivid dreams, and the elder wore a cape of rhinoceros leather and the headdress of the lion's fierce growling skull, as they continued to do for more than 14 generations after. That fire, after 2 days, attracted the remnants of the northern tribe to attend. They joined the eastern tribe for 11 years before leaving to rebuild and repopulate their old hunting grounds in the northern mountains. The western tribe was never seen again, and no trace of them was ever found. Eventually, before the coming of the modern age, the eastern tribe repopulated the western side of the river, and the whole valley, for a time, was once again theirs. The Tayo, Bevo, and Cedric families would forever hold a place of honor at the festival fires.